Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Scary Shorties wouldn't exist without you, the fans. Please like and follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and share the show with your friends to help us grow. Thanks, guys. Don't Pick Up Floating Hitchhikers. Written by James Scott. Read by Drew Grimm. As the sun sank below the horizon, a fierce storm suddenly ripped across the sky. A massive wall of clouds spread out, swallowing the heavens in every direction. The storm engulfed the Black Marlin, forcing the three-man crew of the small fishing boat to cut their lines and leave their hard-earned catch behind. Captain Reynolds swiftly retreated to his cabin, plotting a direct course back to shore, deciding that a brief delay was far better than braving the wrath of the ominous storm brewing over the sea. Meanwhile, Schmitty and his pal Charlie Hobbs stayed on deck, securing everything in place and making sure their rods were safe, as they worked to put more distance between them and the looming storm. Schmitty turned his gaze to the calm water stretching ahead, astonished at how quickly the storm had appeared. The shoreline was still far out of view, and the waves seemed endless. Behind them, the ocean abruptly ended where the churning dark clouds began. Pulling his coat tighter against the chill, Schmitty glanced over as Charlie joined him. After a long, hearty swig from the flask he kept in his pocket, Schmitty grinned with contentment. Deep down, he knew he'd missed the times they shared out on the water, but the thought of the future filled him with excitement. For over 20 years, the trio had fished the waters just outside the inner harbor together. This would be their final trip aboard the Black Marlin. Reynolds was finally ready to retire, planning to sell the ship and divide the money equally among the three of them. The captain already had a buyer lined up, and with the two of their shares combined, Hobbs and Schmitty would have just enough to start their dream business, a crab shack in the city. "Hey, stop being stingy, you Irish bastard, and let me get warm too," Charlie said. "I thought that's what all the fat was for, to keep you warm," Schmitty replied, shoving the flask at him. Charlie was a decent fisherman, Schmitty thought, but a better friend there never was. Their bond was old, salty, and full of waves, just like the ocean they fished. "So I was thinking of names. What do you think about We Got Crabs Depot?" Hobbs asked. Schmitty tried not to laugh. He tried to temper his response as to not hurt Charlie's feelings. "That's the stupidest fucking name in the history of seafood restaurants. Who came up with that? Your sister with that thing?" Schmitty teased. "What's her name? The one with the hump on her neck." "Kathy. And it's not a hump. She just has bad posture, you prick," Hobbs snapped back. "I was thinking, since she already gave me and half the state crabs, we should name it after her. Kathy's Crab Shack. And, it's definitely a hump. Once when I was standing in line behind her at your birthday cookout, I swear it winked at me." Schmitty grinned ear to ear. "Ugh, you're still mad she said no and you couldn't return the ring." Both men burst into laughter. Hobbs noticed something in the water. "Hey, do you see that?" There was something in the water up ahead. At first, it seemed like a bundle of rags, but as they got closer, the faint outline of a person emerged, softly illuminated by the fading twilight. Captain Reynolds noticed it too, and carefully adjusted the course to get a better look. It was a young woman in a tattered white gown, tangled in a patch of seaweed. She was drifting aimlessly. It was the body of some poor lost soul at sea. Captain Reynolds quickly gave orders, and the Black Marlin pulled alongside the floating figure to bring her on board. With 4 daughters of his own, Captain Reynolds knew someone out there would want answers about what happened to this tragic girl. The crew hauled her on board, and Captain Reynolds instinctively checked her pulse. She was frozen stiff. He found it odd that she was so perfectly preserved, with no sign of sea life feeding on her. Granted, he had no idea how long she'd been adrift, but her white gown was intact too, looking nothing like anything modern. The men wrapped her in a blanket and laid her in the wheelhouse. They had already lost valuable time diverting to rescue the woman, and now the storm had overtaken them with eerie speed. Wasting no time, Reynolds began trying to contact the Coast Guard to report the discovery of a dead body. Meanwhile, Schmitty and Hobbs returned to the deck, where Schmitty took another swig from his flask before handing it to Hobbs. "No bites all day, a storm that comes out of nowhere, and now this," Schmitty muttered. "How the hell is this for our last day, huh, bud?" "How do you think she ended up all the way out here?" Hobbs asked. Schmitty just shook his head. "And her skin? Not bloated? No fish bites?" There was a long pause before either of them spoke again, and it was Schmitty who finally broke the silence. "You ever hear the story of the Little Mermaid?" Charlie shot an eyebrow up. "Like the Disney cartoon?" Sorta. Except this isn't Disney. It's more like the Brothers Grimm version. Old Murphy used to tell us stories meant to scare the life out of us. Most of them were silly, and not scary at all. But there's one that always stuck with me. Back when the city first got its name, Lord Baltimore's son fell in love and got engaged to a stunning young woman from France. Or so he thought. They were young, happy, and set to be married. But the day before their wedding, the girl revealed she was a mermaid. The man she believed loved her reacted with disgust. He beat her and cursed her, immediately informing his father, who had her imprisoned. They planned to stone her the next day and bury her on land, far from the sounds of the waves. That night, a single crab crept into her cell and freed her. So she escaped. No big deal." "Not exactly," Schmitty said quietly. "Her father disowned her too. He denied her the chance to reclaim her true form, binding her in seaweed chains and condemning her to drift endlessly." Schmitty turned to him, locking eyes without a hint of hesitation. "With the only men she ever loved both betraying her, they say her hatred became a curse, that she will eat the eyes of any man unlucky enough to find her drifting." "You piece of shit," Charlie snapped. "You just made that up." Schmitty didn't burst into laughter, though. Taking another shot, he simply looked out ahead. In the wheelhouse, Captain Reynolds was in excruciating pain. The girl's hair had ensnared him, pinning his limbs and lifting him into the air. Every strand of hair that touched his skin felt like a jellyfish sting. He wanted to scream, but his tongue was swollen like a blowfish. All he could do was watch in horror as she began devouring his fingers, one by one. "Did you hear that?" Charlie asked. It was just the storm. Let's head inside. It's getting crazy out here." As the two men turned to go inside, they noticed Captain Reynolds standing in the wheelhouse doorway. "Hey, we're coming in, Cap. Everything's secure out here." Captain Reynolds said nothing. When Charlie got close enough, he screamed, or at least Schmitty thought it was a scream. It was hard to tell, with strands of hair shooting down Charlie's throat what kind of sound he was making. All Schmitty could do was watch in horror. Frozen by fear, he slowly backed toward the rear of the boat. He stared out at the raging storm, his life flashing before his eyes. It was a good life, he thought poetically. When he found the courage to turn around, the girl was standing in front of him, her hair dancing in the storm. She had an odd expression on her face and tilted her head slightly at him. I didn't jump because I never bothered to learn to swim, Schmitty said flatly, with some trembling in his voice. The girl tilted her head back and grabbed her stomach, howling with laughter. When she was finished, she glided her way to Schmitty and placed a cold hand on his cheek. She then gave him a soft kiss on the lips before moving to his eyes.